Speaker number 5, Paul L. Brunoforte. Saddle up. Saddle up. Paul L. Brunoforte.
Like many of you, I enjoy reading. Currently, I read 1 or 2 books a month. But I used to read more than 30 books every single month. Mr. Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters and guests, the titles of some of those classics are Mickey and Minnie Mouse Go on Vacation. Goofy Builds a Doghouse. And I think you get the idea. Those were the books I used to read to my sons when they were children. Some were humorous, some were educational, and some had great underlying messages. Like the story of Chicken Little. Now, if you haven't heard of Chicken Little, it's the story of a young chicken that was afraid of everything. And one day, as she was walking down the street, for the first time, she saw some lightning, heard some thunder, and started screaming, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." Soon, some townspeople heard her, and then they started yelling, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." And then all of the townspeople were cowering in fear as they waited for the sky to fall. And they remained fearful for the rest of their lives. Today, there are millions of people suffering from CLS. Never heard of CLS? It's Chicken Little syndrome. Unlike the disease ALS, where your brain is fine, but your body is paralyzed. With CLS, your body is fine, but your brain is paralyzed with fear and worry. Thankfully, there is a cure for CLS, and it's called courage. Courage. And no one described courage better than my hero, that great 20th century philosopher and movie star cowboy, John Wayne. When he said, "Pilgrim, courage is when you're scared to death, but you saddle up anyway." Well, we are all surrounded by Chicken Littles. When I was a little kid growing up in New York City, the Chicken Littles told me, "Paul, never go in the street. If you do, you'll get run over by a car." So it was time to saddle up. I went down to the street. I put one foot in. I jumped back. Nothing happened. I put 2 feet in and jumped back, and still nothing happened. So I crossed that street. I crossed many streets and had great adventures. I drove the Chicken Littles crazy when I was growing up, riding motorcycles, scuba diving, snow skiing. I even went skydiving, always thinking, each time thinking, saddle up. But you'll never know how many of your friends and relatives have CLS until you do something big. And for me, it was my decision to move from New York 3,000 miles to Phoenix in the heart of the Arizona desert. And here come the Chicken Littles. My Uncle Tony said, "Hey, forget about it. I heard there ain't no jobs out there." My Aunt Marie, she said, "Are you out of your mind? It's 150 degrees in the summer." She wasn't too far off on that one. But most of all, the people were trying to scare me, saying that Arizonans hate New Yorkers. So it was time to saddle up. I found a job in Phoenix 2 weeks after arriving, making more money than I was making in New York. And the summers, yes, it's hot, but it's a dry heat. And I love it. Now, what about all those Arizonans that hate New Yorkers? It was years before I ever met anybody who was really from Arizona. Most of the people I met were Canadians. And when I finally did meet an Arizona native, I married her. There's never a shortage of Chicken Littles ready to tell you what you should or should not be doing. You may want to scream, "Leave me alone!" But they mean no harm. They're just sharing their fears. They fear risk. They fear change. They fear criticism. And most of all, they fear the unknown. But really, we were born with only two fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. We learn all those other fears. And the fears we learn, we will ultimately regret. And speaking of regret, if you ever get a chance, talk to an elderly person and ask them what they regret. Rarely do they regret the things that they did. More often than not, they regret the things that they didn't do because of fear. Now, I don't know what part of the world you come from or the difficulties that you have experienced in life, but I am an official elderly person of 71 years. And I encourage you, live courageously, take risks. Will you run into problems? Absolutely. That's called living. There is a place where people don't have any problems, and that's called the cemetery. And we're all going to get there soon enough. You see, Chicken Little was wrong. The sky's not falling. The sky is big and beautiful. So the next time you're faced with a challenge or an opportunity that scares you to death, remember the words of John Wayne and saddle up, pilgrim. Mr. Contest Chair.
One minute of silence, please.